Hello YouTube, welcome back, and this is going to be my first impression of the brand new character in Genshin Impact, Nahida. To be very honest, I playtested a lot of different comms with Nahida, and between all of them, for the most part, Nahida is really good. And honestly, I just don't really know what to say other than, yeah, she's really good, but I'll slowly unwrap why she's really good in most of these cases. And this is going to be probably a longer video than usual, so buckle up a little bit. But as always, before we start, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps a lot and it is free, so let's get started. As the Dendro Archon, you can easily slot Nahida into any team that requires Dendro without problem, and for the most part, she is gonna be an upgrade over the existing Dendro characters in a very good way. Now, to understand why that is the case, we first have to actually start to look at the fundamental, which is how her skill works, and that is one of the reasons why she's so strong. The first thing to talk about is that Nahida have the capability to very easily apply a massive amount of dendro onto a bunch of enemy over a massive area of effect. Let's slowly break down why that is the case. Nahida elemental skill whole form have a very unique function. It opened up this camera looking thing and you can scan over enemy, which will then trigger your elemental skill onto them. Now, the way this elemental skill works is that even if they're in the frame for a split second, they can get triggered with your elemental skill and to get linked up by the second part of her elemental skill. The end result is that you basically just hold your camera and you flick your camera or your mouse in a very 360 angle very fast, and effectively you are usually able to just capture every single enemy within the Spiral Abyss chamber with your elemental skill, and you can chain all of them up together, which just means that it is very easy to apply dendro to every single enemy on the field using just your elemental skill, which by the way have only a 6-second cooldown. But to understand why that is so strong, we have to talk about the second part of her elemental skill, which are the chain and how it applies dendro after you have triggered it in reaction. Up to 8 enemies that were caught in the previous part of the elemental skill will get chained up, and whenever one of them receive an elemental reaction, every single chained up enemy will receive a dendro attack. The end result is, imagine if you have hydro aura on every single enemy and you simply apply dendro onto one of them. Because of the chain reaction, all the enemy currently chained up is also going to receive dendro as well, which means they would then react that dendro with the existing hydro aura on the enemy. The end result is that you have triggered flume reaction simultaneously regardless of the distance of the enemy, as the chain have a very large connection distance, and so no matter how far apart they are, you were able to trigger reaction or just apply dendro if there were no pre-existing aura on the other enemy. The end result is that she's just way too good at applying dendros no matter if she's on field or off field. Previously, we had this expectation to use Nahida on field as she is a catalyst user, which means that you can easily use her normal attack to apply additional dendro. And while that will help, the end result is that putting Nahida off field is honestly really strong as well, because her elemental skill already apply insane amount of dendro already. So how does that tie into effect when it comes down to the team drafting as well as to play with other characters? Well, I'm glad you asked, but unfortunately I won't be able to cover every single team and characters, even though I might have tried them out, just because there's too many. As I've mentioned at the beginning of the video, pretty much that Nahida work in every single team if that require a dendro, and for the most part they apply in a similar way, so you can kind of refer it from there on. Starting off with quicken team, which is dendro plus electro. As the Dendro Archon, Nahida is mostly a major quality of life upgrade over the existing dendro characters like Dendro Travelers and Collie, but there is power increase as well. Namely, when it comes down to a quicken team, the thing that determines your dendro's character's damage is simply the amount of application that you have. As we mentioned before, with Nahida having just really good dendro application over a good amount of area, that just naturally mean that you'll be a good bump in damage over the existing dendro characters due to just having better dendro application. But the most important thing that stood out is actually just the quality of life increase. You can have very consistent dendro application onto each one of the enemy, which is very important to make sure that you have quicken uptime. While it is not necessary, as Dendro Traveler can have good enough quicken uptime or 100% of the time if you play well enough, the fact of the matter is that Dendro Traveler is dependent on what we like to refer to as circle impact, or you're restricted to that small area of your elemental burst, and you have to ensure that enemy doesn't just walk off your elemental burst to get that quicken uptime. With Nahida elemental skill being so much easier to use, it is just significantly easier to ensure that your quicken is always up at any given moment. Of course, additionally, you can put Nahida on field instead with off field electro characters like Visuals and Yaimiko, and use Nahida normal attack to do even more spread damage on top of her elemental skill. While that definitely worked well, it is not actually one I prefer simply because it feels rather uncomfortable to run. Nahida, as a short model characters, have a smallish dash distance. On top of her animation is just a little long, being a callous user. It's definitely something that can work, but it felt very squishy. I found Nahida just herself just very vulnerable, and if I were to run a defensive characters like Uki or Zhongli, then I miss out on something else elsewhere, like I won't be able to bring Kaze into my party, which is a insane amount of damage increase when it comes down to these team like Quicken, as Kaze is not only able to buff your electro damage percent on each characters, but himself can also swirl electro to do aggravate. As a off-field dendro applicator in a Quicken team, as I mentioned before, she mostly served as a quality of life upgrade over dendro main travelers, but I really enjoyed my time with Keqing, Fischl's, Kaze, and Nahida, namely with Keqing driving. The thing about Keqing aggravate team is that Keqing have really good AoE, as her elemental burst has a really large amount of radius, and you're less dependent on the healer as you're a super quick swap team. That means you're gonna spend most of your time in iframe through your elemental burst. The thing that Nahida come into play is that her elemental burst is quite long in top of its animation, which kind of conveniently serves as a longer iframe for this team in particular. Nahida having much more reliable AoE dendro application mean that I can easily ensure my Keqing or Kaze can easily hit every single enemy with the aggravate effect, which allow me to consistently do AoE damage. But one of the most important part is that as a callous users, you can actually bring prototype Ember on your Nahida if you wanted to have a healer. Again, this team doesn't really require a healer as it spam elemental burst for iframe. But if you did, the 6% HP here for every elemental burst can actually cover you enough to survive on this team, and conveniently also just providing you energy on Nahida. Nahida elemental burst has a really low cost, only at a 50 energy cost, and getting that 6 extra energy can easily allow you to ensure that Nahida elemental burst is recharged every single time. So to be honest, prototype Embers on Nahida is a very valid option that you actually can consider here as well, which again serve as your healer option. Fortunately, even without prototype Amber, you can generally reliably recharge your elemental burst on Nahida, as it's again only a 50 energy cost. So in general, Nahida doesn't really have energy problem, which is another bonus for her. The most important thing to take note here is that in a Quicken team, Nahida doesn't fundamentally change how the team is performed or played. Namely, with a different electro character like Cyno still have all of those original problems that was introduced during his release, and even with the release of Nahida, that doesn't really change. And sure, Cyno aggravate team got a upgrade with Nahida replacing potentially Dendro Traveler, who you might be running before, but so did other team like Keqing. So that is one of the most important things to take note, is that while Nahida could be an upgrade for your characters or your Dendro characters in the party itself might fundamentally not change, and it doesn't magically increase Cyno power by twice or whatever amount. The same kind of go with Tegnari in a spread team if you were to run double Dendro. Surely Nahida is an upgrade over the other Dendro characters, and Nahida can provide you with a good amount of elemental mastery to increase your damage on your Tegnari, but it fundamentally doesn't change the play styles of how Tegnari is played. With that being said, let's talk about Bloom team. The most significant impact here that changes how you play the team is of course Nahida as a solo Dendro already have really good Dendro application or uptime, and as Bloom team is dependent on doing the Bloom reaction, which means you are required to do Hydro plus Dendro trigger, being able to apply Dendro more frequently, more reliably over a larger amount of radius just mean you get more blooms, which dramatically improve all Bloom team in existence. To remind you from the beginning of the video again, Nahida elemental skill allow her to easily apply Dendro to any enemy on the field regardless of the distance. That means that characters like Ayato, who has very good Hydro application over a large amount of radius, can see a dramatic improvement with the release of Nahida, as it is much easier to ensure that enemy, even if they're not grouped, to be doing reaction. In general, thanks to the way Nahida elemental skill work, you can expect a Dendro aura being present on the enemy even though she's a solo off-field Dendro. So with Ayato's elemental burst or even skill, for example, just touching any enemy will instantly trigger bloom even though they are far away, which just means that you can create a lot of bloom seed from a large around distance. With that being said, Nahida is definitely a significant improvement when it comes to bloom comp, starting off with just playing some kind of pure bloom comp where you're just spamming bloom, as Nahida have have much more dendro application over bigger areas of radius, which means you can just trigger more seed in general, especially if you have really good AoE applicator like Ayato. That means that you can easily hit the upper cap of 5 bloom and instantly explode your bloom seed a lot easier and a lot quicker. And overall, Nahida just make those comps significantly better than before. But of course, the most important factor here is that Lilo is a bloom specialist, and Lilo could definitely use Nahida. However, I actually still have a few comments about Lilo, so let's get into that. A lot of Lilo owners is probably looking forward to Nahida, and while it is better than before, I do have a few comments I want to address. I'm starting off, the biggest problem with Nahida is unfortunately not fixed with Nahida, which is the lack of a grouper. And sure, you can bring someone like Ayato to have massive amount of area when it comes down to your hydro application. There are bound to still be some enemy that are going to be outside of your effective radius that you're going to still miss, and having a grouper in general is just a lot nicer. This come into play especially if you are going to be bringing other hydro applicator like Kokomi or Xingqius or Yelan, which have much smaller radius when it comes down to their hydro application compared to Ayato. Nahida did change up Lilo comp by a lot. Previously, we preferred to run double dendro, double hydro, with your 2 dendro characters being Dendro Traveler and Kali. I think with the release of Nahida, running single dendro, which is Nahida, and then triple hydro is just so much better, as Nahida already have enough dendro application to kind of do your bloom anyway, and adding a second dendro not only doesn't help that much, but because you're causing more bloom reaction too quickly, you actually can start killing yourself really fast. With the introduction of triple hydro, 1 dendro though, there are a few aspects of Lilo team that got a lot better. One of the most significant one is probably something like Nahida with Lilo, Xingqius, and then Yelan. In this case, you get the huge benefit of being able to bring Xingqius Yelan into your party, which can do a lot of raw damage. And the biggest upside about all of these is while Nahida has really good dendro application, you can more or less reliably have Nahida be your bloom trigger for the most part, since Xingqius and Yelan only apply hydro onto a single target anyway, and they apply so much hydro that they often are able to be the hydro aura, and therefore you can build full elemental mastery on your Nahida, which means that you're able to control who is triggering your bloom. If you play carefully enough, you can actually even arrange the damage radius of bloom, as all your characters in this party has a good amount of range, including Nahida, which you're going to be putting on field in this team, and then Xingqius and Yelan. You can arrange the bloom to the point where you don't take damage from the bloom, and therefore the necessity of having to bring a healer dramatically went down, considering that you already have Xingqius, which with good rotation, you can always make sure that the Xingqius heal go on your on-field unit, which is going to be Nahida. It is definitely a really difficult team to play though, so be careful. And lesser experienced player could replace either Yelan or Xingqius with a hydro healer like Kokomi instead, or you can even combine every single thing I have said before to run something like Ayato, Lilo, Kokomi, and Nahida, in which case both your Ayato and Kokomi might be sharing the trigger, which unfortunately means you might have to build elemental mastery on both of these characters. During my playtest, I found it better to just build traditional artifact on these characters, meaning that you get bigger heal on Kokomi, but also just having more damage on your elemental skill with your Ayato. That is true that your bloom damage will go down, but the base amount increase from Lilo is honestly good enough for the most part, I think. Whether or not should you build elemental mastery on these characters, we will still have to determine through precise calculation and free crafting, and unfortunately I don't have an answers on my hand right now, but it is something you can look forward to. With all of those being said though, I'm actually hesitant to say that Lilo composition is significantly better with Nahida. While there is an improvement, I just don't know if it is significantly improvement, especially considering that we still have a few problems we're trying to solve with Lilo, including again the lack of a grouper, non-deterministic triggers, and stuff like that. I think the other bloom team, namely Burgeon and Hyperbloom, definitely did get a significant improvement from Nahida though, especially Hyperbloom, which I'll consider to be really strong right now. I think the thing about Hyperbloom and Burgeon is that because you're going to be purposely triggering your seed with a specific characters, namely your pyro or electro characters, it is very easy to ensure that you're building full elemental mastery on those characters. In addition, that means that your Nahida can build a traditional crit stat and then just rely on those 2 characters to be the EM share from her A1 passive. Starting off with Hyperbloom, I think Hyperbloom with the addition of Nahida is just one of the most ridiculously strong comp in the game, at least through my first impression. Hyperbloom Hyperbloom was already really strong before, especially with one of its biggest benefit being really easy to play. It is very spammy and you don't really have to know how to properly rotate your team. Spamming your E and Q off cooldown can usually give you a really good result, which is one of the biggest benefit when it comes to home team. And of course, Nahida definitely come in as a really big improvement with team comp like Nahida, the Lancing Shoes, and Raiden, which gets you the benefit of being able to do Hyperbloom and do a bunch of damage, in addition to being able to run the double Hydro combo, your Lancing Shoes, and doing a bunch of raw Hydro damage, and it make it really good in all scenarios. But in addition to that, changing a member a little bit, you can actually run something like Nahida, Sing Shoes, Kazu, and Raiden, as Nahida have really good dendro application area. By doing a Hydro Swirl on your Kazu, once again, you can cover a large amount of radius when it comes down to trying to trigger those bloom. And with the benefit of Kazu being your grouper as well, you just see a significant improvement when it comes down to seed generation compared to before, which just means that you get a lot more Hyper Bloom, which means a lot more damage, which just means it's a lot better. Moving a little bit, you can again use characters like Ayato or maybe even Chayo to be your Hydro applicator, as these characters have really good AoE Hydro application, especially with Ayato having such a large radius in his elemental burst. You can build traditional DPS on your Hydro characters in this case, since your Electro is guaranteed to be your trigger, so you can just build elemental mastery on that character instead. It is also rather easy to switch your final slot for any party member that you might want to bring, such as Fischls or Beidou, who are non-Electros, C triggers, Kokomi instead of the Hydro characters for healing, Fuki instead of Raiden, or if you don't have Raiden for healing. All of these kind of work. There's always ups and downsides. Throughout my playtest, I found it to just be a lot better to try not to bring a healer, especially since Hyperbloom doesn't self-damage yourself for the most part, as this has a significantly smaller radius. The problem with trying to bring a healer is that you often sacrifice a good amount of damage doing so. It is not a problem if you prefer comfort and you'd rather bring some of these options like Jean to help you heal, but in my preference, I liked it to not bring a healer, and I think it's strong enough to not have a healer. Burgeon kind of end up in a similar spot with comp like double Hydro plus Toma plus Nahida, with your double Hydro either being your Lancing Shoes or Kokomi if you want healing, to interesting comp like using Bennett and Kazu as your pyro trigger. In that case, what you could do is something like Ayato, Bennett, Nahida, Kazu, and then you use Ayato and Nahida to apply Hydro and Dendro to create your seed, and then you use a pyro elemental infused Kazu burst, which by the way will be building full elemental mastery anyway, to be your burgeon trigger over that effective radius covered by Ayato and Nahida, and therefore doing a bunch of burgeon. And of course, on top of the benefit again of Kazu being able to group up the enemy. I think the biggest thing about Nahida is that aside from upgrading existing comp power that we have mentioned like Kachings or even Sinos, it also opened up a lot of new comp like the burgeon comp that I just mentioned, or making other characters like Ayato a lot more viable. Finally, there's probably one particular use case of Nahida that people were also curious about, that is GANYU. As you might have heard before, that there is a chance that GANYU can actually use Nahida plus any pyro as the pyro source instead. And as the release of Nahida, we have confirmed in game that that pretty much does work as with the way we think, which means that yes, it is possible to use Nahida plus any pyro characters as your fire starter, and you can just do GANYU charge attack off that. In fact, you can even do that in a large radius and do GANYU charge attack through a larger radius, because again, Nahida have a really good radius when it comes down to applying her dendro application. The thing about GANYU, while it is a really cool interaction of how it works and it could be fun for a GANYU owner, the biggest call here is that it is very likely for this version of GANYU to not even be a DPS improvement over the existing version, and if it is a DPS improvement, probably very minimal. Again, that is something we have to further confirm with calculations or further free crafting, so don't take my word for it. But what I essentially is saying is that there's a very good chance this is not a very good use of Nahida. It is something you can do, but you're probably better off running the other intended dendro teams like Hyperbloom, Burgeon, Nilou Bloom, Fridge, or even just Quicken. For my first impression though, there's just so many good use cases of Nahida, whether that be raising a existing team power level by being a better dendro character, to opening new doors for new characters to be a part of dendro team. I think Ayato is one of the biggest example, as you can very efficiently use Ayato's elemental burst as a large area Hydro trigger. Overall, Overall, again, as I summarized at the very beginning of the video, because we can't possibly cover every single use cases or team with Nahida, overall, on a more general basis, I have to just say she's really good. It is an additional bonus that Nahida doesn't really have gameplay problem herself. It is not like she has energy problem. It is not like she has application problem, ICD problem, whatever. Herself is a really good character already, and all the use cases that she belongs in also make use of her really well. So overall, for my first impression, I have to say this is definitely a really strong character. It is very likely that it will be a really good pickup if you intend on playing dendro team. I don't want to overhype the character too much, so I will leave it up from there, and maybe we'll have a better answer in the week when we get some of the further confirmation on if the things work the way we think it is. So as always, if you're not subscribed already, don't forget to subscribe for that particular video, and I'll see you guys all next time. For the meantime, enjoy Nahida.